Tonight, the true horror of the Orlando club massacre. How a night of music and dancing gave way to gunfire and mass murder. The woman seen here was one of the victims. It's now known 49 people were killed by the Islamic State-inspired gunman, and this evening victims' families are demanding answers.
Why are we giving them access to weapons that could kill so many people so quickly, so easily, all by themselves?
Also tonight, the hate-filled, homegrown terrorist who did it. We speak to his father.
What can you say about his purchase of the firearm?
You heard me that I said if I didn't know, I would have called the law enforcement myself and I would have arrested him.
In other news, England hooligans jailed after clashes blamed on Russian troublemakers.
Lawyers claim Oscar Pistorius is a broken man who should be sent to hospital, not jail.
And cholesterol confusion, the mixed messages to the elderly about statins and diet.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. A more detailed and disturbing picture is emerging tonight of the gunman who shot dead 49 people in a Florida nightclub. Investigators believe Omar Mateen was a so-called lone wolf inspired by various Islamic terror groups. President Obama described him as a homegrown terrorist and said there was no sign of a wider, more organised plot.
Some of those who knew him called Mateen mentally unstable and fiercely homophobic. We've also learned more today about the horror that unfolded inside the Pulse nightclub. And details are being released, too, about many of the victims. From Orlando, our correspondent Robert Moore has our first report.
This was the most deadly assault on America since the Al-Qaeda atrocities of 2001. A mass shooting that appears to be a hybrid hate crime and terrorist attack. Families are still being notified as one by one bodies are identified. At least 49 people were gunned down and dozens more are injured and being treated in hospitals across the city. One of those who escaped is Chris Hansen, the man here on the left helping an injured woman reach safety. He described to me how at first he thought the gunshots were part of the soundtrack.
When you notice the gunman was there, you hear the bang bang, but it's like it was music. You could feel the bass, it felt real, like it was music or a remix, until you look over and you just hear a continuous bang bang, bang bang bang, and it was just nonstop. It sounded like it was a whole song, because it just went on, and then it was silent for a moment and then continued just over and over again. And bodies were dropping.
This video, posted in real time on social media, captures the gunman's opening shots. The woman who filmed it did not survive. Questions are now being asked about the police response. Should SWAT teams have stormed the nightclub immediately? It has emerged that at times they tried to negotiate with a gunman they described as cool and calm. Christine Lionen's son is still missing. She is enduring the anguish of waiting for news, incredulous that Omar Mateen was able to get his hands on such deadly weapons.
One man alone with a hate-filled heart could hurt and kill that many people because he had an automatic weapon. Why are we giving them access to weapons that could kill so many people so quickly, so easily, all by themselves?
The gunman was frighteningly well trained, according to survivors. Chris Enzo's friend Rodney was badly wounded.
Rodney described the shooting as he could hear the bullets hitting bodies and people dying and screaming. So as this guy was moving and taking the shots, he wasn't hearing bullets hitting the walls. He wasn't hearing bullets hitting anything but people.
At the White House, the president, having been briefed on the investigation, said Mateen may have been self-radicalized.
It does appear that at the last minute, he announced allegiance to ISIL. But There is no evidence so far that he was in fact directed by ISIL, and there also at this stage is no direct evidence that he was part of a larger plot.
Oh, say, can you see?
Across the country, there is a sense of solidarity. These activists gathered at the White House. But the aftermath is now also being caught up in the bitter politics of the presidential race. Robert Moore, ITV News, Orlando.
As the authorities work to identify all 49 victims, tributes to many of them have been posted online. 20-year-old Luis Omar Ocasio-Capo is one of the youngest victims named so far. His cousin said he was a beautiful person. And 37-year-old Kimberly Morris was a bouncer at the club. She'd just moved to the area and was described by friends as always smiling.
The FBI revealed tonight that it had fully investigated Omar Mateen on 2 previous occasions but could find no terrorist connections.
His father also says he saw no sign of extremism. Sadiq Mateen told our international editor, Raghi Omar, that he would have reported his son to police if he had known what he was planning to do.
It's not the environment you'd expect to breed a violent, radical extremist. But this comfortable, middle-class, quiet neighborhood in southeast Florida is now a security zone. It's where Omar Mateen, the man who carried out the biggest act of terrorism in America since 9/11, lived and grew up. The police searched his house last night looking for explosive devices and information, with questions being asked as to how he was able to legally purchase powerful assault rifles like this one, as well as handguns. Omar Mateen's father spoke to me today.
Raghi Omar from ITV News, what can you say about his purchase of the firearms?
I'm not aware. We spoke about last night on TV. I'm not aware. I said, you heard me that I said, if I did know, I would have called the law enforcement myself and I would have arrested him.
Omar Mateen first came to the attention of the FBI in 2013. The 2 interviews they had with him were deemed to be inconclusive, and the Saudi authorities today revealed he visited the country in 2011 and 12. I asked his father if he noticed his son drifting towards extremism.
I wasn't aware of it.
You didn't see any telltale signs?
He wasn't the way that the radical, I mean, it's not religion, because he wasn't growing beard, he wasn't getting very disrespect and neglecting his wife and his kid. I didn't see none of those.
His son's actions have been described as an act of hate as well as terror. Omar Mateen's father said he was devastated at the targeting of Orlando's gay community.
This is a free country. Everybody has a choice to live in the way that he or she feels like to live. And nobody has the right to do anything against nobody. And I take side with those people, they got killed, their family, and those people, they got injured. He had no right to do anything.
Omar Mateen's father is now left to bring up his 3-year-old grandson and ponder his son's horrific legacy. Raghi Omar, ITV News, Southeast Florida.
Right, let's go back to Robert Moore in Orlando. And Robert, as you said in your report, there's already a real political dimension at play here.
Well, you might have expected a period of reflection while this investigation begins, but actually, really, Donald Trump is defying all conventions. He is already saying that this attack vindicates his threat analysis, that it justifies that incendiary call that he made late last year for a banning of all Muslim visitors into the United States. That, despite the fact that this gunman was born in New York and was an American citizen. I think what's happened here is we have an attack that exploits many of the existing fault lines in American politics and culture over gun control, over immigration policy, over hate crimes towards minority communities, over national security and counter-terrorism. It is all in the mix here, which is why this has become so political so quickly.
All right, Robert, thank you very much indeed.
Well, let's move on to other news now. And Wayne Rooney and the England manager Roy Hodgson today urged England fans to stay out of trouble ahead of Thursday's match against Wales. UEFA has warned more violence could mean the team gets kicked out of the tournament.
6 England fans were jailed today after clashes in Marseille, but so far no Russians have, despite prosecutors blaming 150 of them for instigating the violence. From Marseille, here's our correspondent Emma Murphy.
That they were organised, determined and extremely violent was obvious to anyone who saw the violence in Marseille this weekend. Now the French authorities have admitted a gang of 150 known Russian hooligans managed to get into the country, and indeed the stadium, to foment 3 days of brutality. Not one has been arrested. Describing them as ultra-rapid, ultra-violent and extremely well-trained, Marseille's prosecutor acknowledged some had been stopped at the airport, but the rest breached French security and are free to infiltrate other games.
Il y avait des hooligans de nationalité russe.
The hooligans from Russia travelled from other countries on trains and in cars, he told me. We would have known and arrested them had they come through the airport. The Russians were the most organised and violent, but it was the English fans who were in court today, 6 in all arrested for violence. Among them, Alex Booth from Huddersfield, jailed for 2 months for throwing a plastic pint pot. His father told me he turned 20 yesterday whilst in custody and was guilty of being verbally abusive but not violent. The judge thought differently.
It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. Making scapegoats out of poor kids like Alex. Find the real thugs. Excuse me.
During the course of the weekend, 35 people were injured, 4 seriously. These scenes led to UEFA's threat to throw both England and Russia out of the tournament. Today, England's manager and captain Wayne Rooney appealed to fans for no repeat.
I'm appealing to you to stay out of trouble and to try and make certain that these threats that are being issued are never carried out.
I'd like to ask the fans, please, if you don't have a ticket, don't travel. And for the fans with tickets, be safe, be sensible.
This city is now calm for the first time in 3 days. And with today's sentences, it seems the French authorities are keen to send out a strong message to deter others from violent actions. However, with no Russians in custody, that message is significantly weakened. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Marseille.
Here, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has been out campaigning today to try to persuade Labour supporters to help keep Britain in the EU. It follows concerns in the Remain camp that their message isn't getting through.
His intervention was dismissed by the Leave campaign, which said immigration is not being controlled, as our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
Referendum campaign in trouble. Who are you going to call? Gordon Brown began Labour's referendum fightback in the East Midlands.
I'm delighted to be in championship-winning Leicester.
He was here to make that occasionally elusive argument the positive case for remaining in the EU.
I tell you, the biggest job creator over the next 10 years is going to be the single market of the European Union. And it's important to recognise when a mother is thinking about the prospects for her children, when you are thinking as you leave university of what you want to do, where the jobs come from is going to be important, and they're going to come with hundreds of thousands potentially from the rest of Europe.
But he has not been able to satisfy the concerns some on his own side have about immigration.
We've no idea how many people will come next year, the year after, 10 years' time from the European Union. We don't know which countries will join the European Union. We don't know whether the euro will collapse.
And in places like Leicester, where all the seats are Labour held, support for the EU may be ebbing away.
Why did I change my mind? Well, I think we've got a duty to be in Europe, but in all fairness, I do think that with the immigration levels the way they are, we can't sustain it.
I just think that when somebody like the Governor of the Bank of England says we ought to stay, we ought to stay.
Why are you out, sir?
Because there are a lot of liars.
Some of Labour's most high-profile women were also trying to get the message out today as the party tries to catch a vote which is threatening to slip through its fingers. Carl Dinnan, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, Reeva Steenkamp's father says he wants to give evidence against Oscar Pistorius for the first time. And
how the world is showing solidarity with the Orlando victims. And that story and more of the day's news after the break. Join us, Sam. Hello and welcome back. Oscar Pistorius was described as a broken man in court today as he appeared for sentencing over the murder of his girlfriend. The athlete's defence team said he's so traumatised he should be treated in hospital and not jailed. But prosecutors insist Pistorius has still shown no remorse. Our Africa correspondent John Ray was in court.
Silence, ladies and gentlemen.
Oscar Pistorius awaits his fate and the strain shows. In the same South African court that has seen so many twists and turns in this tragedy, today his defence team presented the killer as one of the victims, traumatised, depressed, fearful.
He has become despondent, lethargic and disinvested, leaving his future in the hands of God. In layman's terms, one would describe him as broken. In my opinion, his current condition warrants hospitalisation.
Riva Steegkamp's family watched on. Her father is expected to testify about the devastating impact of his daughter's death. Prosecutors say Pistorius isn't truly sorry.
It can never be true remorse. It can be, I'm sorry for myself. I took her life. That could be, isn't it?
That Pistorius will go to jail seems certain, though there is still much at stake.
This is no longer a question of guilt or innocence. It's about finding a punishment to fit the crime of murder. Above all, it's about the character of just one man.
And if he can convince the court his remorse is genuine, that he poses no danger, then sentence could be much less than the 15 years demanded by the prosecution. John Ray, ITV News, Pretoria.
Here, a man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the bodies of two women were found at a house in Liverpool. The victims are believed to be a mother and daughter. Police received a call this morning raising concern about their safety.
A controversial new study is claiming that cholesterol may not cause heart disease in older people after all. It questions evidence linking it to premature death and even suggests it may help people live longer. Our health editor Rachel Younger investigates yet more conflicting advice on what we should and should not eat.
We can't help the hand we're dealt health-wise. But if you're over 60 and prone to heart disease, the advice on minimising the risk has long been to lower your cholesterol levels. Until now, causing not a little confusion.
They contradict themselves constantly. One day you can eat this and tomorrow you can't eat it.
Well, I've been taking statins for 20 years and I'm thinking of discontinuing them.
Because of the article?
Yes.
Why? Well, a report co-authored by this doctor claims that in 9 out of 10 cases, over 60s with high levels of so-called bad cholesterol actually live longer.
We, in a way, have I would say at best grossly exaggerated the role of cholesterol in the way we look at it and heart disease. There's a much more nuanced approach that we should be adopting.
Don't you accept though that you would need a full trial with drugs and placebos before you could ask the NHS to be changing its dietary guidelines?
I think what we need is an overhaul in dietary guidelines. I think we need to stop fearing saturated fat.
So does that make a mockery of the millions the NHS spends on statins to lower the cholesterol levels of those at risk?
This is one report saying one thing which we disagree with. There are hundreds of studies that say the opposite and would not agree with them. And I'd ask the public to see whether they trust the majority. Most of the docs in the world don't agree with this.
Still, both sides believe exercise and moderation will tip the odds in your favour. Oh, and avoiding stress. Not the easiest when trying to unpick conflicting health claims. Rachel Younger, ITV News.
We end tonight's programme with reaction from across the world to the terrible events in Orlando. Vigils have been held in many major cities in memory of those killed.
Flowers and tributes were left at makeshift shrines and rainbow flags, which symbolise gay pride, were flown in honour of the victims. Sejal Karia reports.
With the heaviest of hearts and the gentlest of voices, a choir in Orlando sang in defiance of the events their city witnessed, the pain and sorrow evident among those gathered at a local church. And they were not alone, for right across America, people came together, united in grief. And in a show of solidarity, victims were remembered around the world too. On the streets of Glasgow, a vigil. A message of support from the heart of the gay community in London.
We observe 1 minute's silence. Thank you.
Silent reflection from the politicians in Westminster. And tributes from as far afield as South Korea. A world coming together to remember, to support and to grieve with Orlando. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
And that is it for now. Tom Bradby will have the very latest developments on that story on News at 10.
From all the team here, the Evening News team, good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.